We have so many fun things to discuss today. But let's start with this. I'll share a kind of it's not a joke, but it's something funny my friend said. So I went to school for dance, and I had this friend, Kat, and she's very smart, she's very wise. She's a mystic without knowing it. You know mystics, like, you spot each other like ninjas? You're like, oh, I know you're a mystic, but you don't say anything. It's kind of like a thief knows another thief. She's kind of like that. So I was talking to her, and I was like, so we're in school for dance, we're in this really rigorous art program, taking 8:15 ballet every day, and I'm like, Kat, could you imagine if we were like out of school and learning from mystics, like our professors were Zen masters or something? And she said, well, yeah, we would show up to the auditorium, we would show up to class, and no one would be there. I'm like, that's true. And she's like, exactly, because there's nothing to know. There's nothing to get, right? That's the whole Zen thing, right? So if I were to be completely honest with you and sincere to the highest degree, I wouldn't be here and none of us would be here. But that would be no fun. And I think a lot of you guys paid for a badge to be here. So we're gonna have fun and we're gonna chat about stuff. And I made this beautiful graph for us to explore. So we're going to explore non-duality through the perennial philosophy. So before I even jump in, I'd like to ask you guys, when you hear the words non-duality or perennial philosophy, what does that make you think of?
Presence.
Presence. I love that. Beautiful. Yeah?
Something that's always been.
Something that's always been. I love that. Mm-hmm.
2 into 1.
2 into 1. 2, not 1 into 2. 2 into 1. Yeah? Beautiful.
The middle way.
The middle way.
Yeah.
Yeah? Love that. Middle way. Yeah?
Balanced, yeah.
Beautiful.
There's nothing but 1. There's nothing that exists that is outside.
There's nothing that exists outside of it. Absolutely. Nothing that exists outside of the one. Beautiful.
To me, the perennial philosophy is also kind of like the multitude of expressions that happen within that oneness.
The multitudes of expressions that happen within that oneness. That's a deep one, because we can go up to the mountain and have these ecstatic, beyond ecstatic experiences or anti-experiences. But if we don't come back down, we don't enjoy all those expressions. I love that one. That's a big step, yeah. Anything else? What does the word mysticism mean to you? You be with the one?
Yeah, dancing with the mystery.
Dancing with the mystery?
The hidden stuff.
The hidden stuff, yeah.
Someone or is mystic is someone who experiences mystery firsthand.
Oh, I love that. Experiencing the mystery firsthand. Beautiful. Gnosis, yeah?
Stepping out of the story.
That's a big one, stepping out of the story. I love it. Cool. So all of these traditions up here are different methods, practices, or systems to do all of that, to step out of the story, to have direct experience with the mystery, oneness, being with the one. And here's the thing, I'll tell you a little bit about me. I don't know about you guys, but I personally hate suffering. Like, I really hate it. And it's been kind of my mission to end it for myself as much as I can. And so when I'm reading this literature of all these mystics, of all these cultures, I can't help but think I have found some sort of a cheat code to life, like the manual of incarnation that we never got, or we did get, but it was, we kind of had to search for it. And so the more I read, and I've been studying mysticism and tarot and occulture for a long time. I started when I was scarily young, like 10 years old. I scared my elementary school teachers bringing tarot cards to school. This was in the 90s before it was totally mainstream. And so, the nudity on the cards. What is that kid doing? Is he bringing porn cards to school? No, they're tarot cards. Let me give you a reading. Oh, it was such a vibe. What a time. Yeah, so I started early, right? And tarot was my gateway drug into the occult, which was my gateway drug into mysticism. And I've been asking these questions my whole life, like, what are we doing here? What is God? Like, what is all this stuff? And since I was young, I was like, well, I can be sure of one thing, and that's that I am. And maybe it was a little cartoon. I wasn't reading Descartes at 12 years old, but I just was like, well, I am. So where can we go from there? And then when I started to study all this stuff, the Eastern mysticism, the Western mysticism, the philosophy, I realized that, oh, I wasn't that original. They already got to it before me. But that's fine, it's cool. So I'm reading these manuals of I am and consciousness and being. I'm like, oh, that's the stuff. That's the juice. That's the perfume that I'm looking for. This is what I came for. And I can confidently say that studying all these, like really studying and incorporating it into my life has helped me overcome so much stuff. Right? I've overcome so much depression and anxiety and all types of, oh my God, so much stuff. And I've tried so many, the coaching and the somatic healing and the therapy and every freaking hobby, and then fire spinning. Then I had a dance company. Now I run a multi-year business. Now I do this. I've done it all. And it's like, nothing has brought me lasting peace more than these traditions. But the trick is cultivating, and you said it, the gnosis. Okay, so let's talk about gnosis. So if you're ADHD like me, and you like to hyperfixate on things, you get into something, you read everything there is about it, you info dump to anyone who's willing to hear, and it's very intellectual. If you're a head tripper like me, the mind is going and going. And I love that about my mind. I love it. But the thing that I've learned over the years is that you can know everything there is to know about any tradition or any system or any philosophy, but if it's not, there's a step that must be taken to get the juice. And the juice, what I'm talking about is that true moment of no return, that true singularity where it hits, and it's like, and listen, when I was young, I was stupid, I did a lot of drugs, I was chasing a lot of good feelings. But when it hits, it's like there's nothing else. Nothing else touches it. And you're changed forever. And for some people, this happens spontaneously, like they don't control it, they just kind of fall into it, and they're like, whoa, and then that's it. Other people take decades and decades of work to cultivate an experience like that, lifetimes. There's no, it's not a science. It's not like, oh, if you do A, you will do, a lot of these traditions will claim if you do A, B, you'll get X, Y, Z, and a lot of them are true, but, and I think a lot of us have had some experience like that, some kind of glimpse that has brought us into the work that we do at Convocation, whether it's paganism or witchcraft or magic, or we see the world in a different way. And I find that all these mystics have seen the world in very unique ways. But one other thing I really love about them so much is, culture, besides like staying alive, eating food, shelter, besides the basic needs, a lot of cultures don't agree upon a lot of things. However, that mystical moment, that point of no return, that one thing I find to be so agreed upon. It's like the common denominator underlying every religion, at the deepest level of every religion. That one common denominator is that one thing that they actually can't express. Which brings me to the faultiness of language. So when we discuss non-duality, the fun part is we really can't discuss it. Why is that? Because we know that language is dualistic. All words point to something else, right? That's why, God, being, consciousness is nameless in so many traditions. So I'm going to offer you a fun definition of mysticism as I define it. I define mysticism as the highest meta. So if you want, you can write that down. Mysticism, the highest meta. What the fuck? Truly, this is all going to be a fool's errand. That's why the first card of the tarot is 0, the Fool, because it's like there is nothing to talk about, but we're going to play. We're going to play with it, right? So mysticism, the highest meta. First, what is meta? Does anyone know what meta is? I'm not talking about the corporation.
It's going above.
Going above. I like that, going above.
Thought about thought?
Thought about thought. I have a tattoo of a brain in a thought bubble, thinking about itself. I love where you're going, yep. Thought about thought.
Computers, it would be data about data.
Data about data, okay. Data about data, thought about thought. What do all these have in common?
Going in on itself.
Going in on itself, yes. Thought about thought, data about data, going in on itself. This is all self-referencing. Self-referentialism. Okay, so mysticism equals the highest meta. Meta is self-referencing itself. So what is the highest way that our self can reference ourself? Let me give you an example of meta. Let's say, if I were to say, I'm giving a presentation right now, that's meta. If you were to be watching a movie and the actor breaks the fourth wall and talks to you as the audience, saying that he's an actor, that's meta. It's in a world, coming out of the world to reference the world, okay? So in mysticism, if we took that and we brought it to the nth degree, the most existential scale, it would be us as a unit of existence referencing our existence from quote unquote outside of our existence, but not really, okay? So ourselves, referencing ourselves, the fact that we exist, referencing, coming back into our own existence, it's direct. There's no intermediary. Religion has plenty of intermediaries, whether they be good or bad or whatever you think about them. There's the priest, there's the practices, there's the ritual, and all of those things are good. Magic is an intermediary. High and low magic, all symbolism intermediary. Knowledge, language, they're all intermediaries. But mysticism, what makes mysticism unique is that there's really, at the very edge of it, there's no intermediary. There's no interface. It's your own being coming back in on itself. And what does this do? The mind stops. And so all the anguish, all the suffering that at least I love to let go of and destroy, it's just gone. And so that's why when mystics get to this point of ecstasis, this point of no return, they realize that there was nothing ever possibly wrong. And they abide, it's not, now here's the illusion. We think of things like enlightenment as a state to be in, and I get it, because enlightenment is, and I even said in the beginning, I don't know if I said this, but I'll say publicly, my biggest goal is enlightenment, but there's a joke there. There's a little bit of a, the irony is that there's no enlightenment to get to, right? Rather, it's almost like, here, I'll use a common metaphor. It's kind of like if our life is like a picture on a canvas, right? And there is this blindingly white sun. And we look at the sun, and the sun is so blindingly bright on our canvas, it's actually white. And we look at that white sun and we say, oh, that's enlightenment, I want to get there. But what we don't realize is that whiteness of the sun is actually the canvas itself, and that we are the canvas. So reframing enlightenment or spiritual awakening not so much as somewhere to get to, but rather a release of all the surplus, superfluous content, experience that is everywhere. When we release all of that, what remains is that sweet, sweet blankness, which so many mystics describe ecstatically. What I'm talking about right here is this blue area going into the red. So let's talk about these stages right here. I want to talk about the blue area first because in some ways it's the most important. It's the very edge of where logic and language really start to fail. So in all these traditions that I have up here, we have Advaita Vedanta, we have Upanishads, we have yoga, we have Tantra, we have Plotinus, we have Hermeticism, astrology, I threw in some Carl Jung, we have Kabbalistic Tree of Life, we have Tarot. Who's familiar with any one of those? Throw your hands up. Okay, everyone here is familiar with at least one. Great. So I'm going to paint a little bit of a picture of how a lot of these traditions work. Now listen, I'm not the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, so these are not strict correspondences. They're just comparison, they're juxtapositions to explore something that is perennial, something that keeps showing up behind whatever tradition. So let me paint this picture for you so we can kind of get a general understanding. We're using space as a metaphor. We're using above and below as a metaphor. We've all heard from Dr. Hermes Trismegistus. We all love him, right? As above, so below. Hashtag Emerald Tablet. We love it. Yes, bringing it back. We're never going to let him go. He's like, guys, get over it. There's so much more stuff. We're never going to let him go. Pagan, we love it as pagans, yep. Hermes Trismegistus, he's great, right? Emerald tablet. But, oh my God, read the Corpus Hermeticum, then your mind's really going to blow. Oh, girl. You just wait. If we have time, I'm going to start spitting some fire quotes from the Corpus Hermeticum, from the Upanishads, we'll get there. Okay, anyway. So, as above, so below. Does anyone, who understands that? Throw your hands up. Okay. As above, so below, there's a couple interpretations. There's a more mesoteric one, and then there's an esoteric one. Mesoteric interpretation is what happens on one scale happens on a lower scale. So traditionally, or in the technical Hermetica, we might say, okay, astrology. What happens in the cosmos is reflecting on what's happening in Earth. If we take a more Kabbalistic approach, it's like the anatomy of God via the tree of life is similar to the anatomy of the human soul. As above, so below. Same patterns. The more esoteric interpretation of as above, so below is that the above is the invisible observer and the below is the visible creation of that observer. But ultimately, there's really not a distinction between the two, which Hermes Trismegistus will actually say. Yes, Hermeticism is ultimately a non-dual tradition, just like ultimately Kabbalah, Carl Jung, questionable, Plotinus, Neoplatonism, the Advaita Vedanta, clearly, they're all non-dual traditions. So, above, if we were to kind of, let's bring it down a notch. Above would be divine, getting quote unquote closer to God. And I'm putting this in big quotes, right? Because remember, there's no distance, right? Above is closer to God, closer to divinity. Below is closer to our human experience. Now, here's the thing. Since antiquity, we've had all these mystical traditions drawing all these maps to God. Why? Because we frickin' suffer. And we don't like to suffer, so hey, let's draw a map to something else to focus on, because this shit sucks. So let's keep drawing more and more maps until we get it right. And do they ever get it right? No. Why? Because there's no distance. But we're going to pretend there's distance because it's good for the mind. The mind likes distance. The mind likes space and time. The mind loves space and time. So under all this stuff is for the mind. But remember, eventually the mind's going to stop and all of this dies, right? I love the tree of life more than the next person, but you got to let it go eventually. Because guess what? There's no tree of life in Keter. Absolutely not. So anyway, so what I'm going to give you now is for the mind. Because if you're like me and you're a head tripper, you want a model to play with, and we're going to have a lot of fun playing with the model. But if we have time, I'm going to bring you through a meditation that's going to hopefully skyrocket you up the tree of life. And what I've done before, this has actually happened before, I've had students in workshops like these who I've never worked with before, who have skyrocketed up and have had like ecstatic experience for like 30 seconds, and they're like, oh my God, that was the best feeling I've ever had. It's freaking cool. I love it. Now that I set the expectation, it's not going to happen. No, just kidding. You don't want to have any expectation with this work. Scratch all that. Nothing's going to happen, okay? Absolutely nothing. Anyway, we'll get to the meditation later. But so let's talk about the model right here. And this model is not just a model that you see in so many mystical traditions, but it's a model that I find is very much in our life, in personal development. So let's go back to the blue. The blue is the prism. So let me paint this picture to you. The red is nothing but the truth, so help me God, right? So the Godhead, the divine, the oneness, that which you can't speak about. Why can't you speak about it? Because it's non-dual. Because to speak about it would be to label it, and you can't label it. That's so important. So what do we do here? Well, we can talk slightly about the blue area. The blue area is the first duality, the first possible duality. And what is that duality? I said it before. Words, yes, but there's a specific word. It's a pronoun.
I.
Yes, there you go. Beautiful. I. Beautiful. I. Why is it I? Because that's all that you can be sure of. I am. So I am is really the only words that can come up here is I am. Coming back into your I am. Coming back into your sense of being. Can you all agree that you are? Is there any doubt that you are? If there's a doubt that you are, we can find someone to talk to. No, just kidding. Just kidding. No, but I find that I am presence. You are aware now, yes? Now, I'm not saying that this laptop is real or I'm real or whatever, but you are aware of something going on. There's an awareness, right? Can anyone doubt that? So that awareness right there, boom. That's the most important thing. But here, the gag is this. You ready for this? You know you're aware, but what's aware of that awareness? Ah, now you're in the arena of infinite loops. Gets a little crazy here. Notice that the subtle duality between you as awareness, as pure awareness, versus the fact that you are aware that you are aware. So, to simplify that, I simply say that I am. That I am is the most subtle duality in here, in the blue, the first duality. It's an infinite loop, by the way. This you might compare to the logos of various traditions, and you might compare this to the magician of the tarot, and you might compare this to lots of other things, the MC of the universe, the magician and the logos. So the way I view this, it's like if the white light of awareness is the Godhead, which is here in red or in white up here. This blue area is the prism, that initial refraction of that light that allows for duality, that allows for you to even say I am. Because remember, I am, there's a duality. There's the I am, and then there's the you saying it or experiencing it, right? Very subtle duality there. Okay, so if we go downwards from there, that prism refracting the light of being into I am, into you, is going to continue refracting the light into all of your inner experiences, your thoughts, feelings, sensations. So I am what? I am Joe Monteleone. I am at Convocation. I am this. I am that. I am a multidimensional being. Great. Yes, exactly. I am a multidimensional being. But even that, the multidimensional being, there is an idea after I am. So whatever we put after I am closes in. It takes the infinite and refracts it, folds it up, and makes it more finite, right? So all of our inner experiences here, through all these traditions, that's the inner world, the inner duality. And there's a lot. There's a lot there, okay? Carl Jung loved this place. He had a good time. Rest his soul. Okay, now, there's an outer duality as well. So in the inner duality, and this you might, if you choose, compare this to magic, where a lot of magic, we're working on the inner duality to affect the outer duality, right? Because as you know, if you don't do your shadow work and things start backfiring, well, you got to do your shadow work. That's here too. All this inner stuff, all this inner duality. Okay, so the inner duality starts to refract and bend and create the outer duality, which is our circumstances, the world as we know it. Just the day-to-day, the stuff, the physical, everything. So the map behind me in that presentation has a lot of important visual information on it, and I'm realizing now it's probably not easy to see everything in the video. So what I've done is I've created a free downloadable PDF version of that so that you can follow along. You can even print it out and put it on your refrigerator so that all your guests know that you are studying the mysteries of the universe. You can download it at the link in the description below this video. Now let's get back to the lecture, where we're going to explore this model as a template for personal and transpersonal development. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a story. I'm going to tell you a personal story about my journey up here, and I'm hoping that maybe you'll relate to some of these experiences, because not only do these mystical traditions map out an ascension towards unity, but they kind of show stages of normal, just personal development, which I think is very important, because how are we going to unite with God if we don't even have our own shit together, right? And a lot of these traditions had guardrails. You're not supposed to study them until this or that, or there's all this stuff. Now it's 2025, you can do whatever the hell you want, right? Because, and look at me, perennialism on steroids. Yeah, it's so fun. Okay, so I'm going to tell a little bit of story of somebody, a person, and you can, be curious about this, and maybe you'll relate to it, maybe not. But this is what I find. I'm somebody who's worked in the personal development world and the coaching world for a long time, and as a teacher and as a coach and working on my own shit, these are the patterns that I've found. There's usually 3 stages. The first stage is in the green. It has to do with outer duality. And then this is where people say, life sucks. It just sucks. And everything's going down the drain, down the drain. I can't control anything. I'm worried about money. I'm worried about relationships, and life just sucks. And people look at themselves as an effect, as just an effect of their circumstances. They can't do anything about it. They feel disempowered. Who has ever felt that way before? Throw your hands up. Okay, most of us. Great, great. So we've all been in that place. It's not fun, right? Because there's no agency. There's no, yeah, it's just you. Feeling like you're at the whims of the universe and you're like looking for signs and messages and nothing's showing up. Okay. This is what I call the mechanical plane. It's very Newtonian. It's very, well, this knocked into this and that knocked into that and that knocked into me and that hurt. And I don't want that to happen again. There's another stage, the inner duality, which is when we pull our focus from the outer world of what's going on, who said this, what my partner's doing, what's happening globally, what's happening politically. We start pulling it into our inner world and we say, okay, wait, what I'm having trouble with is not even what's happening outside in the world. It's the way it's making me feel. It's the way that my nervous system is lighting up in response to this thing that so-and-so said, or this thing that the person said on the TV, or what's happening with work, or my kids, or family, or whatever. It's the nervous system. It's my mind. It's subconscious. It's my inner story. It's how I'm taking everything that I'm experiencing and framing it into my sense of self and where I think I'm going and what I'm afraid of. Oh, my God. And you know what's crazy about that? That could be even scarier than the outside world if you go deep enough. Oh, boy. But that's a very brave thing to do.
One of the things I've realized is that my whole spiritual journey has been reframed. And when I realized that, and even finding states of non-duality is a shift, is a reframe.
Yes. So you've been reframing. That's super important. So you probably had many reframes here, and then you've done a reframe here. And when you reframed in non-duality, you probably looked at this stuff. You're like, oh wow, that's nothing compared to this. It gets better and better. So let me describe a type of person who's working in their inner duality. Usually, they are focused on their own, to a degree, their own sovereignty, their own ownership of their life. They have goals. They're aware of their feelings. They take accountability for the choices that they make and their feelings and their reactions. They're very self-aware, and they do the work, whether that's shadow work, whether that's personal development, whether that's therapy, whether that's magic, whatever it is, they do the work. They go into their nervous system, they go into their subconscious, and they build a better relationship with themselves. This work is like the work. It can take forever, right? I'm still doing the work. I'm sure we're all doing the work, right? What happens here, if you do enough of the work, I really believe, this is just my belief, but I believe you could have almost everything that you want. So I started down here. I was doing drugs with the wrong people, didn't know who I was, living with my parents. Oh my God, the shame, shame, shame. And then I got to here where I manifested everything I wanted. Home of my dreams, partner of my dreams, multiple six-figure business, literally tick, 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 going through the boxes, manifested the shit out of my life, and I had everything. And I was like, oh my God, I freaking did it. I just want, one of my goals was to write a best-selling book. We got to number 2 on one of the bestseller lists. Fuck yeah, I did it. And the reason why I'm telling you that is because still, having done all the things that I wanted to do in life, all the things that had a result, there's this missing piece on my puzzle, and I'm obsessed with it. There's this stirring deep, deep within me that's like, it's just not complete. And that realization of whatever you get here in the inner world, however good you feel about yourself and whatever you've accomplished for yourself, there's this missing it's like, those puzzles where, there's squares and one square is missing and you push one piece into the missing, you keep pushing the pieces into that's the samsara, right? That's where we're just constantly, this thing is missing in my life, you get this. Oh, now this thing is missing, you get this, right? That's the treadmill of samsara that we run, burning our karmic calories, and we go and we go. And so, where do we go from there? That missing puzzle piece, I have found, can only exist in the transpersonal, in reframing what it is you're actually looking for. And I'm not going to say that everyone is looking for this, but I find me and many of my students and many people of the world are exploring, trying to find some sense of wholeness, some sense of completeness. Again, if that's not what you're looking for, that's totally cool. But I find underlying a lot of our efforts are, because when we're in completion, when we're in communion with what we're doing, whether it's art, whether it's being with loved ones, whether it's making love, whether eating food, whatever, when we're in communion with it, there's no us anymore. There's just what is. It brings us back into that sweet isness, that pure being that has no interruption of itself. There's no space, there's no time, there's no distance. And then we can say, oh, I've been happy, but I didn't notice I was happy because there was no one to be happy. There was just being. It's the best. So, in the next stage of development, when we go beyond the inner duality, we go into the first duality. And that first duality is simply I am. It's simply being. It's simply isness, the business of isness. And every one of these traditions, and I would believe every mystical tradition in the world, talks about this isness in one way or another. And so to me, having literally gotten all that I wanted down in here, these two places, it is only logical for that isness to take priority in my life. Because nothing else is going to do it for me. So these traditions, what they do is they help cultivate or accelerate the process of, dare I say, returning to that isness, returning to that simplicity of being. You know, sometimes it sounds so freaking boring. But to some people like me, and I hope maybe you, I think it's the most important thing, right? It's like, I run a tarot school. I teach people how to make tarot businesses, and I teach esoteric tarot, and I teach all this fancy stuff, and it's mind-blowing, and it's great, and it's wonderful. But it's content. It's ideas. It's symbolism. It's beautiful. But it's like eventually, you know, you study every symbol, you study every correspondences, you study every piece of history to understand everything, and then there you are with that missing piece. What else? The only other thing to do is to come back into the being. And I would go as far as to say that all these traditions, all magic, all symbolism is an expression, somebody said expression, of that being anyway. But sometimes we can get so lost in the sauce of it. We get so lost in the exciting, dopamine-pumping new thing that we're back in that trap. We're back in that, ooh, give me, you know? So the first duality is your own sense of being, simply that you are. And that can be the doorway to our top level here, which is non-duality, which we really can't say anything about. And so, as I said before, you know, when my friend jokingly said, if we were to learn from a Zen master, you would show up to the classroom and there would be no one there, because there's nobody here. There's no one at the top level. But that's not to make it philosophical. It's actually the most practical thing ever, because when mystics come down from the top of the mountain, it's the recognition that there's nothing there, including nothing to worry about. So when we go up and we come down back into our world, these traditions are going to help us go there, but then we want to come back into the world with that understanding. And when we come back into the world with that understanding, the world lights up. And instead of it being this place where you're lacking this and you're fighting for that and hankering for that and worrying about that and all the things, all of these things are nothing but ripples and folds of that nothingness or that fullness, depending on the tradition. Nothingness would be Buddhism, fullness would be Vedanta and other monas, maybe Kabbalah, but nothingness or fullness. And so there's no difference. That's a beautiful place to be, you know? Oh my God.
Your energy's really sweet right now.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm sure you're like my new favorite person.
Thank you. It's hard. It's not hard, but it's a topic I'm very passionate about. You know, because I've been in the New Age spirituality community, tarot community mostly, and then tangentially pagan community, and I've been, you know, studying and seeing people throughout years and seeing what they do, and I see just the repeated, you know, we make a little progress, but then we come back, and then we make a little more progress, and we come back, and there's so much spiritual stuff out there that's tap dancing around the big thing, and at least the big thing for me is that place. So, yeah. Does anyone have any questions before we go into some, maybe look at these traditions individually?
It's a little silly, but the question that popped up for me is like, as you come more and more into your knowing of, what you are, what the I am is. The question of how are you begins to stump me.
Yeah.
Begins to having trouble being, I'm more socially awkward the more that I drop into just this beingness, the more socially awkward I become.
I love that. The more you drop into beingness, the more socially awkward you become. Okay. So yeah, is it the you that's here? There's a couple ways we can go about that. Is it the you that's socially awkward, or is it the you just being, and the awkwardness is the play that's happening? That's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is the very experience of social awkwardness as another piece of content within your experience to dissolve in being. Yeah. There's the classic, is this mine or is this somebody else's, right? Is this my awkwardness or is it somebody else's? And the thing with being, dropping into being, recognizing that everything you experience is nothing but being, it's nothing but isness, allows you to take that awkwardness and put it on the altar of existence, on the altar of God. Sorry, I used the word God. I hope that doesn't bother anybody. On the altar of consciousness, and just let it be there as another little unit of consciousness. That's a bold claim, because then you can say the same thing about things that are much harder to deal with than social awkwardness, right? But there are mystics that go there.
I mean, in a sense, what you said when you go to the higher level and come back is something like, don't sweat the small stuff if it's all small stuff.
I would say yes. Well, I would say in the context of this, there's nothing but small stuff, but even the big stuff is small stuff. So I'll give you so there's an exercise we do. Let's do an exercise to kind of explore that. So this idea of don't sweat the small stuff. I haven't read that book, but it's been recommended to me a lot. But the saying, I would say don't sweat the small stuff is in the inner duality, because in inner duality, we're looking at the content of our experience. So let's say somebody says something to you that's a little triggering, that's a little bothersome. You could say, okay, don't sweat the small stuff. And you can look at it as small and recognize that you are much bigger than whatever that person said to you, right? So that would be don't sweat the small stuff. I would say to an existential degree, we can bring that up to here. And the way I would do that is like this. So, fun exercise. This is in my book too. If you can measure the distance between the top of your head and the bottom of your feet. Take a moment to just feel that distance. Just draw that line. Feel where your body begins in space at the top of your head. Go to where your body ends at the bottom of your feet. Now do the same thing from right to left. Go to your right shoulder. Notice where your body begins on your right side. Measure all the way to the left shoulder, the leftmost point. And just feel that distance in your body. Now I'd like to see if you can measure your consciousness. See where your consciousness begins and where your consciousness ends. And if you can find a beginning or ending in your consciousness, let me know. Has anyone found an edge to their consciousness, a beginning or ending? There's none? Okay, great. If you did, it's okay. Don't be afraid to speak up. You cannot find it in 3 dimensions? Beautiful. I love that. So I don't find a beginning or ending. And so I'm going to come right back to it. I just want to link this. When we say don't sweat the small stuff from an inner duality level, we're looking at something and kind of making it small versus us that's bigger than that, which is good, a good practice. When we're going at this level, we're recognizing that whatever that small thing is, it literally is only a small thing in the literal infinite size of our consciousness. So it's not just the small stuff that we don't have to sweat, it's the big stuff too. The big, big stuff. Because it's all just forms coming and going in our awareness, which has no beginning or ending. That dichotomy is this prism right here, that threshold. It's the threshold of the high priestess. If you can see our Kabbalistic tree of life here, the high priestess is the threshold between you as a body of water, as a human, a body of water literally, versus the infinite ocean of being, of consciousness, which is behind her, her veil, which is the tree of life.
I was actually just going to say on that exercise, so an intellectual level slash slightly, viscerally, understanding, yeah, there's no end to consciousness. But then my thought, this character that's me, his thought arises and says, well, I can only see so far if I project my mind out, so wouldn't that be the edge? And so just noticing that and trying to I guess, what do you mean when you're saying consciousness?
Yes, that's a really good, and there's a important distinction here, because so for example, what the physicalist, the reductionist would say is consciousness is not what I would say is consciousness. And what the Vedantin would say is consciousness is very different than maybe even what a psychologist would say is consciousness or the self. So by consciousness, my definition of consciousness, it kind of comes back to the self-defeating paradox of mysticism, but ultimately it's that which is. It's the quality of isness. Because how would it be if it wasn't in consciousness? So the big claim, and this is the big Advaita claim, is that for something to truly exist, it must be in consciousness. Otherwise, where would it exist? Some people will argue, well, that's a little human-centric, but it's like any argument has to still come into consciousness. So now, that's not to say that the mind doesn't have limitations. So in the Advaita Vedanta tradition, there's a difference between chit and chitta. Chitta is the mind. The mind, and in the tarot, this is the suit of swords versus the fool. Suit of the swords is all about the mind. The fool is all about consciousness. In Plotinus, this is kind of the difference between the one and the soul. In astrology, this is the difference between the planets and space itself. So the mind does have limitation, and it measures in terms of the beginnings and endings of content. So you can say, I can envision only so far, and then I can't imagine or visualize anything beyond that point. That's the mind, because it's content. However, that mind, now this is the real fun one. This is going to bake your noodle. The mind itself, in all of its measuring, is itself an experience within consciousness, because by virtue of you being able to talk about it. That's a big step. That's a fun one. And you know this because we dream at night, and the mind is doing all these things, and then we go into deep sleep, and the mind goes away. And in deep sleep, there's nothingness. So another thing to compare it a little bit more practically, there is a level of bliss that we experience beyond the mind, and people achieve it in all sorts of different ways. For me, I don't know, maybe it's because I have a lot of Pisces in my chart and I'm lazy, I don't know. I love falling asleep. It's one of the best feelings ever. You know when you're like, you know that moment, like not when you're sleeping, but when you're about to really fall and you're like, take me, right? You feel that? So that's actually a little bit of the first duality. That is, the causal body in the Upanishad, or close to the Anandamaya Kosha in Taittiriya Upanishad, that's the bliss body kind of coming over you, right? So I recently got a procedure done at the hospital, and they put me under, and I was like a little bit nervous because I hadn't been put under in a long time, and they put the anesthesia in, and I felt it go through my body, and I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. And then I remember the last thing I said was like, wait, this is actually pretty nice. Can I have some to go? And then I was like, ah. And then I woke up and I was like, oh, okay. But it was like a nice feeling, because it's the mind just finally dissolving, going away. But here's the beautiful part about that. We can achieve that bliss without sleeping, and then it's even better. There are all these techniques show us how to do that. Okay, are there any other questions before we start to tour some of these systems? Yeah?
I guess maybe just a bit of an external validation. Is it normal? I mean, I've even heard Ram Dass saying this, like, for me, like, I float in and out of these, like feeling said, you know, something triggers, it's like a wormhole, travel in, and then you're in it, you're like in the drama, and then like finally able to kind of like fall again back into the I am space. Does that make sense?
Not at all. No, I'm just kidding. It does. What do you mean? You're not in the I am space all the time?
Okay.
Oh my God. No, that's it. That's it. Of course. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Would we all be, would I be, you know, I talk about this, I'll info dump about this to anyone who will listen. That's why I started a whole school on this. But would I do that if I was in the I am space all the time? Maybe. But, you know, that's exactly it, is we do. We go up and down. And these aren't, it's not like once you graduate from green and you get to yellow, you're in yellow. You never have to worry about green and you focus on the blue. No, we're up and down all the time, you know? Absolutely. And that's the journey, right? And then we get to these places. You know, I get to these places, I was like, oh my God, that was fucking great. And just by saying it drops me down a little bit, right? By having an attachment to it. And then like, yeah, it's like, we get very far, but these we still got to eat, you know, we still have normal biological things. We still experience lust and all that, which aren't bad. They're more base level things. And then in here, yeah, we still get butthurt sometimes when people say certain things. That's totally normal. So the art of it all is the trick here is, first we want to get to this place. We want to have that point of no return, whatever that is. That could come accidentally or through practice, through meditation. If we have time, maybe we'll do a meditation today to kind of cultivate something like that. And then the step is, how can we best abide in that throughout life? But I would challenge the mystics sometimes and say, if we were to fully abide in that, would be life as much fun? I don't know. Maybe. But yeah, there's part of the art, because here's the gag at the end of it is this. When we get triggered and we come out of that I am space, we've never really come out of that I am space, because all we're experiencing is more ripples and folds within the fabric of isness, and we're mistaking it to be something else. This is the big Advaita claim. This is they say the issue is not that you're not it, it's that you're misinterpreting. There's a lack of there's ignorance. So through that ignorance, or you know, the Tantra might say it's play. It's the play, the lila, right? They're all about the play and the fun of it all. Is there's a beauty to that. But we never really leave the I am space. We just think we do, or we pretend things are something else, which we have to do because, you know, we got to pay taxes and we got to make sure that heat's turned off when we leave the house and we got to da-da. So, yeah.
You're talking about something I'm going through right now, because I found the space, and now I'm thinking about, okay, because when I'm there, but then it's like, okay, I start speaking, I start thinking, the thoughts start coming across, and do I embed myself in the story? And I'm recognizing now it's not happening so much accidentally. I'm being deliberate about choices I'm making in terms of what story I want to take the ride on. And because I'm in the middle of writing a couple books, I've got a business that I'm trying to get going, and those are not spiritual things. I'd rather be, but then I come back down, and it's like, I feel like my attention, I don't know where to be yet because it's so new. And I mean, that will just level out over time, right?
So it's a curious thing. The way, and this is why I like this model, is because there is likely a place, not a place, there is likely a stage that we get to where we are always, or most of the time, up here in that space. And we can still operate on, like you're growing a business, writing books. And I think, I mean, to me, that you said it wasn't spiritual. I think that is spiritual. But to me, it's like, eventually, yes, it will all kind of become just forms passing through this being. However, this is so important, and maybe this might be the most important thing to take with you from this workshop. We don't want to use this as an escape from those things, which spirituality can, I'm not saying this is what's happening with you, but for some people, like going up, rising above the planes and doing all this stuff, that can be an escape, and then we're actually escaping all the work that's down here. But I would say, it's kind of like, the way I think of it is like this. I'm the farthest thing from a scientist, but I'm trying to learn a little bit about physics, because I feel like I'm lacking in that department heavily. So like Newtonian physics, Newton was like, okay, action and reaction. He looks at the world as like things knocking into each other to make things happen. I got here on a plane that was built from Newtonian physics. Newtonian physics will work at a certain scale. However, when you start looking at giant things like planets and stars and black holes and huge amounts of gravity, Newtonian physics doesn't cut it anymore. You have to use relativity. So Einstein and relativity, realizing that space and time are relative and warping each other all the time, that's what you have to use. It's a different paradigm, different set of tools, I guess. I don't really know. Conversely, if you get really, really, really small and start separating super small particles and seeing what they do when you separate them and measure them and realizing, oh my God, are they affecting each other from so far distance away, and entanglement, then you have to use quantum physics. So it's a whole other different paradigm that's even more subtle than relativity, but it's a different scale. So when we're working on our book and working on our business and doing the day-to-day, we use these tools of the inner duality on that scale. But for me, in the mornings and in the evenings, what I do is it's not that I go up to this higher level, but rather I release the state of functioning required for that day. And what I do is I realize that there was nothing functioning besides being. And then I just abide in that. So another way to think of it is it's like if there's a calm, still pond, and then in the day you might like stir it around and make some ripples and do the things, and there's motion in the ocean, and then at night it kind of stops and it's stillness again. And in that stillness you recognize, oh wait, it's just water. It's just water. No matter what waves or currents or motions in the ocean I experienced today that looked like the diversity of my experiences today, it's just water in that stillness. So that's how I kind of navigate that. It's a great, great question.
I found that when I've had moments that were more spiritually, I wouldn't say completely oneness, but more in that direction, it has kind of gave me a slight existential crisis, where like doing this stuff on the mundane, or not mundane, my spiritual stuff that isn't quite as dry feeling, but like, what's the point? Like, we're all wondering, why am I helping this person and myself, and if none of this really even exists?
This is a big one. Okay, existential crisis. So when you realize that none of this exists, why do it? Ooh, I love it. This is such a big one. Okay, so important. Let's get you right now before you go too far in that direction, okay? No, you'll be fine either way. I totally feel, yeah, lots of my students, we talk about this, right? I've had students say like, Joe, I did your meditation and I'm here at work and I'm like, what the fuck is this hairbrush? Like, why am I here? Totally. Okay, here's the big step. Because if we go too far into it's not a state, it's a realization. So the realization is that your isness, your being right now, there's no difference between that being and everyone else's being and everything that is. It's the same isness. And yet, that isness takes all these shapes. So what you can do is you can be like a monk and deny the world, and I did that for 2 years, and I studied all this stuff really intense for 2 years, and I had all these great experiences. I was so happy, completely overcame my depression, was like blissed out all the time. And all I was doing was sitting in my apartment and working on my business and didn't really see anyone. There was not a whole lot. There was life. There were some projects I was working on, but it was very like, I was in one room the whole time. It was blissful, it was great. And I said, okay, that's enough. I'm gonna go find love. And then I found love, and then I moved into another, and now I'm more in the world, right? So when we look at the forms that isness takes up, if we were to look at them and say, well, it's not even real, what we're doing is we're not honoring those forms, and we're throwing out the baby with the bathwater. We don't want to reject the forms. We want to receive the forms, but the trick is recognizing that those forms, and by forms I mean people, places, things, day-to-day life, they're nothing but the isness, right? So is it all made up? Yes. Is money made up? Yes. It's a game that we're all playing. A lot of us enjoy it. Some of us don't, but it's the game. Yeah, it feels real, but the isness is real. So think about it. A classic Advaita metaphor is one that people use is like waves in the ocean. We can know that the waves are water, but still respect that it's a wave. And when the wave comes, we get ready to go up and down, so that we're not but we know it's water, right? So and that's the trick is recognizing that it's all isness still.
I found at least where I'm at now, I almost have to try to like pretend I didn't have these realizations in order to like get back in this world and do stuff that's meaningful again. And it's like I'm almost like, oh, I don't see you, this realization that I had. I don't know how to just bounce in and out and be like flowing between all of them.
Yeah. But that's the beauty of it is, and that's the art. That's the next step. You go to the top of the mountain, then you come down with that understanding. And I would say if you have that understanding, and it's not that nothing is real, it's that truth simply is. So, instead of rejecting this isn't real, like this is bullshit, and I've had all these conversations too, so I know where you're coming from. Yes, that's correct, but instead of emphasizing what's not, emphasize what is, and that's isness. And then bring that back into the world, and this is a very subtle thing, but this is a fun bridge between the above and the below, is recognizing like what's something that you find to be so unnecessarily annoying, oh, this isn't even real.
Say mosquitoes.
Mosquitoes. So yeah. So mosquitoes, and then they're buzzing, and then they're biting, and it's like, oh my God, thank you, God, thank you, being, thank you, existence, because it's nothing but existence. I'm not saying I'm that way all the time. It's like there's levels of difficulty with that, but yeah, it's seeing the divinity in everything. And to me that is, there's a lot of literature on masculine and feminine energies coming together, but to me, as in a lot of Eastern mysticism, Shiva and Shakti, it's the observer and the observed, and they're really not different, but we experience them as different. And so whatever we're observing, whether it's a mosquito, whether it's taxes, whether it's whatever, it's like, it's nothing separate from the observer. So it's collapsing the distance between that. I think Krishnamurti was big on that. He would say, look at the mountain. Now notice that there's not really a distance between you and the mountain, because you're experiencing the mountain right here. So it's collapsing the distance between all these things. That's a little bit more of a tantra approach, kind of leaning into the experience. But I would value that understanding, because Buddhists would be so jealous of you, right? So have that, and then. But here's the thing: at that level, when you have that understanding, you could start pulling gold out of this thing. You could start kind of it's all not real. So what would I like to create here? It is a dream. It's more of a reason to squeeze every bit of juice out of this lemon of life. Yeah. Let me see what time it is. Okay, we're at 12:33. So any other questions before we go to our next thing?
It's not really a question per se, but it's more an observation of something that I read before, like that whole coming down, going up, coming down. It has more to do with that I am that came here to have a human experience. Like, I came here to experience these things, so why should I be so upset when I'm down here experiencing all these things? I can't always be here.
Yeah. Yeah, some would say, that's what all is for the experience and the play, the Leela, the just having it all. Yeah, there would be mystics up here that would say very radically that we don't even come into incarnation. There's like no, incarnation or reincarnation. There just isness. But they're like very, very radical. But yeah, I would say, and I think that is sort of that kind of hovering between the inner duality and that first duality of us kind of having all these experiences within and without and enjoying that from here. Yeah, but I think that's a very valid way to approach it. Yeah?
Yeah, I really liked what she had to say, because I've got a saying, I'm a spiritual being having a human experience, and I'm a human being having spiritual experience, and which kind of for me ties into as above, so below. Mm-hmm. And when I added the end to that and realized, oh, I came here for experiences, and it's all spiritual. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There is no difference in that other than what story is being triggered, what habitual thought is running through my mind, and can I sit in the energy and just allow all of that to fade away and drop off.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. And I would push you a little bit there, because that we can have an experience and say, okay, I've come to experience this, I've come to incarnate and experience that, and that justifies whatever experience we have. Or we can say that we are spiritual beings having a human experience with, I would agree. If you want to go further, what you can do, and the reason why you would do this is for those experiences that are not fun, is you can really interrogate, I can't speak today, interrogate the experience, and if you actually like really, so there's a couple ways you can do this. One is the going into the experience, one is the going out. So if you go into the experience, which is a semi-tantric approach, but also in somatic healing, this is a big thing too, feeling the feeling in your body, surrendering to the feeling, very effective. One of the most effective things you can do is to really deeply go into it. So that's not necessarily interrogating it, but it's like listening to it. And that actually lets the energy pass through. That's a big one. That's huge. It's one of the most effective things, actually. I've studied a lot of stuff. You get someone there, they have a reaction, feel it in your body, just keep feeling it. Amazing, amazing technique. Now, that's one way. Then there's the neti-neti approach that comes from Chandogya Upanishad. Opposite direction, but here's the thing. In neti means not this, not this. Again, we don't want to escape it. So we might have some feelings about something. We don't want to push them away. Neti is not about pushing your feelings away. It's about recognizing that you are not the feelings and being the space that you really are, having the feelings. Yeah, so that's very, very, and a lot of modern, at least the therapists that I've talked to have said, yes, that's a good thing. I don't know, I'm not a therapist in any regard. So, but they like that. But those are two ways we can deal. But it's a funny thing is, whether we get super close to the experience that we don't want, or whether we recognize that we're not that, either way, what we're doing is the experience is finding its way to dissolve into the space of our being, which ultimately, and this is the big one, has no experience at all. It just is.
Thoughts on divine love and isness? Do you feel that there's either a subject-object relationship there, or is divine love perhaps just a quality of isness?
Divine love and isness. So I would say that divine love to me is not ever personal, but like loving someone, like romantically, not that, okay. So not that, I would say, yeah, divine love is impersonal, and it is just the nature that we share, underlying all the BS that we experience between each other, that in life, in the world, and it's like we have our proclivities and preferences around people, but beyond, because that's all in the mind. So divine love, right? So the relationships that we build with people are always in inner duality. I mean, they're literally an outer duality. It's another person, right? But the love is in the inner duality. It's the feelings that we have with them, and the sweetness and the care and the vulnerability and all that stuff. But when we get to here, see, the beauty, I mean, even like romantic love can point to this, but at this stage of love, and I would go as far as to say even romantic love, why we love it so much is it points to the divine love, which is here, which is not personal. It's like when you get to that point of, you know, if you have that relationship with someone where you're so open and exposed in every way, and there's a piece to it that it's like this disclosure of who you are. We love that so much because that is a small little glimpse down here of what's here. Because at here, the divine love is not personal at all, because the personal is so submerged in the impersonal, or in the transpersonal rather, and that love is just the being, is just the isness. So I would say, could they be the same thing? I would say that divine love may be an experience a couple ticks under isness, because we can it is an experience, maybe an expression of that isness. I would say maybe it's close to that ecstasy body that we experience. Fun thing about the ecstasy body is, and the yogis will tell you this, the Vedantins will tell you this, it's like, after the ecstasy body, you got to keep going, right? A lot of us get trapped in the, ooh, that felt so good, let's do it again. But no, you want to let go of that. What was that movie?
Because of the energy orgasms that can show up.
Energy orgasms that can show up? That would probably be in the inner duality, but maybe poking up here. I'm not quite sure.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, that sounds fun. That sounds great.
Too much of anything.
Totally. Too much, yeah.
So, just a little curious, like, how you think about, I'd say maybe dreamscape?
The dreamscape?
Yeah, like when you're unconscious and, like, you have, like, prophetic or, like, dreams with specific messages.
Dreams with specific messages, prophecy, all of that is in the inner duality. That's in that would be the dreamscape. So dreams, so in the Mandukya Upanishad, it breaks it down to your physical body, your dream body, and then your deep sleep body, and then ultimately God. That's kind of the rough breakdown of it. And so in the Vedantic tradition, they would call that the Taijasa. And so there's a whole world with that too, the dreamer and the dream world. And that is your literal inner duality, and there's so much in there that is helpful. So prophecy, messages, symbolism, all of that stuff, the archetypes, mythology, story, all that richness that Carl Jung was very big on, and other people too, Joseph Campbell, tarot, like all of that is in the inner duality. And there's a lot of great things we can do with that. We can take that and, you know, get messages, interact with ourselves, but see how there's still a duality there? There's you in the dream. There's you and the self that you're working on or learning about. There's a dance between you and yourself. Now you can take that and turn it into magic and make something happen in the inner world or the outer world, draw it down into manifestation. Or what you could do, which is fun, is if you're having a dream, you know, if you're vivid dreaming and you're aware that you're dreaming. I heard this from an amazing teacher who I forget his name right now. I always forget the names when I need to remember them. But you can go into the dream, you recognize you're dreaming, and let go of trying to change the dream. That's a fun one, and see what happens. It's totally be aware of the dream, but just surrender, let it go, let it run. But keep your awareness of it, that's fun too. But yeah, but then when you fall into deep sleep and there's no dream, that is the peace, or that's part of the piece we're looking at here. It's a little bit, sometimes it sounds a little odd. It's like, deep sleep, really? When I was reading the Mandukya Upanishad for the first time, I was like so pumped to finally have time to take on this bad boy. And then it told me, I was like, deep sleep is a mystical state? What? I was like, it's kind of lazy. Really, guys? Come on. This tradition's like what, 2,500 years old? That's the best you got? But then I didn't know like what I had to do a lot of research and like listen to like Vedantic swamis, and then I was like, oh, this is like turning my whole world upside down. Like, it's a big step, but yeah. Any other questions or reflections before we do a quick meditation? Oh, yeah.
I'm almost struggling to communicate because it's so profound to me, I suppose, but perhaps I'm a radical, but I feel called to speak out for the bottom layer there, the intersocial, the world, the embodiment practices, as mentioned a few times, human embodiment, embodying yourself in humanity, finding your humanity, but also recognizing the suffering of other people and not just turning aside, say, money and politics and all these different distressing, problematic things. There's a tendency in some traditions to kind of, escape into the self, as we've mentioned. And of course, that's not the right way. But to escape into a self, to go to the monastery, to go to the top of the mountain, and unlike Zarathustra, never to come down past that knowledge to people, never to try to bridge the gap and enlighten other people, right? But it's so necessary, I would say, especially in your case, that speaks to me. There's this dynamic between the individual psychocentric, I suppose, from a therapeutic standpoint, having a psychocentric focus on just yourself and your own psyche and what's going on here, but to bridge that into empathy and to feel that in other people, and the agape, I guess the love that you mentioned right here. If you follow that agape and that human embodiment far enough, and you recognize that everything is a construct, everything is bullshit, and that money and society and all these things are bullshits that we create and we play, then it is possible to enlighten as many people as possible, to recognize that and to say, hey, let's build something better. We know now that we can, and we should. And that's something I feel like is not always spoken about in the spiritual community.
Totally, yeah. Yeah.
It's revolutionary, I suppose, like literally revolutionary. I think we do need to open our minds to that, to share and spread enlightenment so that we can all build a better society, a better world together too.
Absolutely.
In that space where we spend a lot of our time, right? And sometimes we suffer through it, but it is possible not to have to suffer through it, I think. I think that life is not implicitly suffering. That's just me. It's not my lecture. So.
No, it's an important point. And there are people that do both those things. So there are many organizations that are fully the Bodhisattva path, and all these organizations and monasteries, and they give a lot and teach and do a lot of amazing work. And then there are also traditions that are doing less of that. And then there's also mystics that are all the way up here that they didn't even know to plan it, and they get up here and they stay there and nobody will ever hear about them. And we've probably seen them on the street sometime, and we have no idea. Maybe they don't even know, but they're just there, and they're just not doing it. So, and it's my belief. This is my personal belief. Though both of those can happen, I find that in going closer to the understanding, and again, all these traditions are very different, but the higher you go, the closer they are together. In that understanding, it's very hard not to give back in that way. Having that deep understanding, because it's like, because what you recognize, I find, is that ultimately you're really not talking to anyone but yourself. And I don't mean that on a personal level, because that would be a projecting thing. I mean that on a deep, like, it's just like the same presence that I used to be I'm still a little bit socially awkward, but I used to be even worse. But like coming into this understanding, like I used to, when I was younger, I would not look at people in the eyes. I don't know, has anyone ever experienced like avoiding eye contact? But as I grew older and studied a lot of these things, I recognized like, oh, that presence, it's the exact same. So I believe that this can't help but support that work and helping people and building community, and that's an important point, absolutely. Because again, the shadow side of it, if you want to call it that, might be the escape and doing the opposite. So something to think about, absolutely. I mean, anything can be an escape, right? And I know, I got a lot of Pisces. I love a good escape.
I think part of the journey is recognizing that's what you're doing. you're just avoiding things, because I know that when I was sitting in presence, and I was all of a sudden this word, and I'm thinking, I'm here, I finally got here, and I said, I could do a lot of damage because nothing means anything. A lot of damage. And then the word responsibility popped into my head. I have a responsibility to myself, and that is, do I want to be a part of the social community that my human self is in? And do I want to abide by the laws? And, that was, no, I want to fit in. I'm in a relationship, I've got friends and everything, I'm just going to go about my business and everything. And just that word responsibility, since I woke up even more, it's become, how can I get my message out there to touch people? And that's an interesting energy.
Yeah, there's something about it too, because what I'm talking about here, and people can, again, remember, these traditions were not taught to a lot of people for this exact reason, for people to misuse it or misunderstand it, or be like, oh, I could do a lot of damage from here. I am of the belief that you having got to that space, I don't think you would do damage from there because by virtue of you getting there. But what somebody could do is, let's say you wrote a bunch of notes down on your experience, and you write, okay, these things aren't real, and this world, Vedanta is very radical. They say the world is unreal. It's a pretty big claim, and that can lead to existential crisis, which is a whole nother lecture, by the way. But I really want to get into that with you. But it's not nihilism. The Buddhists argued against the Vedantins, saying that what they were doing was nihilism. The Vedantins argued against the Buddhists, saying what they were doing was nihilism, and they argue and things. But it's not that. So it's a very subtle thing, but absolutely it can be commandeered into an existential, what can create an existential crisis. But I think the biggest thing here not to forget is, in that space, there is being, there is. It always comes back to I am, which is, I think Swami Dayananda said this, answering somebody said, how can you prove all of this? You can't prove anything of what you're saying. And he's like, oh, it's very easy. It's that which can't be refuted, which is that you are, which is that I am. And so you just come back to I am, and it's just, I find, and maybe this is a little bit too much of a poetic reach, but I find that I am has, within that I am, that's it. There's no, if you are to do damage, then it's you are doing damage and that you're going downwards into something else. But in I am, even in looking at somebody and whatever, within that, the effects of I am, the effects of abiding in that with somebody else is the work, is helping people, is building community. And that's the beauty of it, coming back down from the mountain and recognizing nothing really ever changed.
It's funny, I keep hearing all these words, and I love them all. And, I just heard the word responsibility. And as you make these journeys up and down and up and down and up and down, you accumulate with your gnosis, you accumulate wisdom. With each piece of wisdom you are gifted, you become responsible for it. When you are responsible with your wisdom, then yes, you are out there helping to enlighten others. But we're also seeing in this world that can look very nasty sometimes, we cannot hammer enlightenment into somebody's head. We have to me, that's the true meaning of being the change. Responsibly using our wisdom, helping people that need help, and not enabling people who would do greater harm.
Yeah. I'll share with, just because this image is coming to me, this is a little bit of a weird image, so excuse me, I'm a little bit of a weird person, but I always think of it you have, like an octopus. I love octopi. Is that the plural? Octopi. I love octopi, right? They have all the tentacles. it's kind of like we're all these like tentacles, right? And those people that are bringing damage, it's so easy for that tentacle to go inside a crevice in a rock, come out the other end, and think it's its own thing. And that tentacle is going to move and stretch and pull against the octopus because it's trying to escape and it doesn't know why it's stuck to this rock. And it's doing everything that it can to get unstuck, when really it just has to let go, release, come back into the octopus and realize it's part of the whole thing. So it's like we all have, but that's the struggle. But exactly, you can't force enlightenment. You can't force any of this stuff on anyone. You just have to let them run through it. In the same way as we can't force our own enlightenment or our own growth, we just have to, through the grace of existence, God, being, whatever, we just got to feel the things, go through the things. And yeah, and that's part of it. I have my neuroses and my attachments, and I just, you let them run their course, as does everybody else. And yeah, but it's almost autodidactic in a way. We almost, to a degree, we kind of self-teach, which is the idea of karma, because we have those people in the world have those thoughts that are of separation, and it comes from a deeply vulnerable, hurt place, usually, I find. And so they act on them, which brings more hurt, but that's just the game. That's the treadmill. They got to burn the karmic calories, as we all do. So, yeah. If you'd like to learn more about non-duality or the perennial philosophy, please check out my playlist here. If you'd like to learn more about tarot, please check out my playlist here. And if you'd like more free material, guides, and ebooks on these matters, you can go to tarotmysticismacademy.com/e-books. I look forward to seeing you in the next wormhole. Much love.